let's continue with... What the fuck am I saying? Here is article number 3, which is from a favorite company of mine. It's called Level Up Translation. So Level Up Translation is the company that I noticed when I first started doing podcasts, because they had very nice thumbnails on social media, although the images were not fully optimized. For example, for Twitter, because like the text used to be truncated a lot. And even though I was at first like very excited, because like they seem very productive when it comes to their blog articles, I started seeing recurring posts. So they basically repost the same blog articles, but this time this is a new article that was released on, actually it's not that new, it's from September 9th, but for some reason I haven't seen it, I haven't spotted it on social media before. And this one talks about how to create a perfect game localization kit. So for those of you who listened to some of the earlier episodes, gaming localization is something that is missing from my portfolio, and it's a big shame, because I really like games. So I think this is still something that I have to do, and I think actually I might do that as part of my live localization project, because I think I should be able to easily find like some indie game where the guys have like zero budget, but if I could offer them localization for like a cheaper price, like I wouldn't take any compensation, and maybe we could even find like some translators that could do it free of charge, just for the publicity. And yeah, so I think that would be like a perfect thing to stream, and it would be a perfect thing to create like a video series on YouTube, because it would be my first time working on game localization. I will be streaming it live, so it will be like a huge learning experience. So yeah, I really like that idea. Anyway, so even though this is not something that I have experience with, I can just use, first of all, my common sense when it comes to what these guys are saying. The second thing is that I'll try to kind of like connect it to my experience from software and UA and from marketing, because technically a certain localization kit maybe should be available for any kind of project. Anyway, so they have a couple of tips here. So number 1, I really like if articles have numbers. Number 1, specify your target player. Who are you targeting your game at? You surely have a type of player in mind. We need to know who that is. Gender, age, hardcore, casual, other games they might like, etc. The languages used won't be the same if your game is aimed at teenage boys rather than middle-aged moms. So this is of course a good point. We should always be translating and localizing towards a certain target audience, and this is again something that I was mentioning many times on the podcast, based on the way Gary Vee does his marketing, is that his marketing is like very targeted. So instead of like giving out some like message like which is like a very generic and tries to talk to pretty much the whole market, let's say you want to sell a t-shirt in China, so you might want to have like the basic thing, which is, this is an awesome t-shirt, buy here, blah blah blah. So it's like a copy that is very generic. And when we go back to localization, you probably wouldn't have that much effort with it to get it localized. But the thing is that you might do a lot better if you created like several different messages for each different cohort, or how one of the article called it cluster. So instead of saying, hey, buy this awesome t-shirt, is like, if you want to, like, I don't know, let's say target teenagers in high school, you might want to say, you'll be the coolest guy on the high school, buy this t-shirt, you know. Or if you are like, I don't know, like some old dude, you might say, I don't know, your wife will be jealous if you wear this t-shirt, buy here. Something like this. And so my whole point was that because we might have to create different messages for each different marketing cohort, we actually might need different types of translators for each cohort. Because someone who is like old, maybe they are like very good at generic messages or generic marketing, but maybe they wouldn't be able to come up with the right translation that's aimed towards teenagers in China, if you know what I mean. So that's number 1, specify your target player. Number 2, include your formatting preferences. What do you prefer in terms of formatting? Remember to include punctuation style, capitalization preferences, preferred abbreviations, any other preferences. Remember that we can't assume your preferences. If we don't know them, we may use formatting that doesn't suit your workflow, and we'd really like to avoid that. So in this case, I'm not so super convinced, especially when it comes to game localization, which, okay, I don't know much about. But I think it depends on the maturity, on the localization maturity of your client. Because like if there's somebody new, and if they read this article, they would be like, why do you need this? Like, why would I need to give you like the punctuation style for Japanese? Like, I created my game in English. Like, how about you tell me like what should be the punctuation style for Japanese? So this is kind of like a style guide, I would say, from my experience, and depends on the client. And again, it's based on how mature they are when it comes to localization, especially like if they have like a big localization operations and they have like their own language professionals, kind of like SMEs, or like they're dedicated like reviewers who check the quality of their LSPs, then these people might be actually the ones who will be creating style guides. But in any case, I think it should be collaboration. So I think as an LSP, you don't want to be kind of just like on the receiving end, like very, you don't want to be like very passive when it comes to like the style guide. So I don't agree too much with this tip. Okay, let's move on. Number 3, describe the tone. Is your game supposed to be funny and sarcastic, or is it rather dark and gritty? Maybe it's more conversational or rather formal in tone. Localization will vary drastically according to the tone you specify. There are endless ways to localize a given string depending on the tone you choose. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, I mean, yes. But is it, if you as a LSP or translator have enough reference, shouldn't you actually be able to like know like what is the tone used based on the files you receive? Like, do you need to be explicitly told? I'm not sure about it. Like my whole and I was actually dealing with this recently on my own, is that I think like the whole idea should be, and this is like for all the LSPs and actually even for freelancers, well, maybe not for freelancers, the whole idea is that we should make it as easy as possible for our clients to submit or give us like the minimum amount of information so that we can start localization, and we should take care of the rest. For example, if there's like something that you can figure out like based on the source files that you get from the client, then you don't want to explicitly ask them to give you that information if it's something that you can figure out on your own. I think this is kind of like a general applicable thing that doesn't apply only to localization. Like, if you can figure out something on your own, as long as you can do it like in a reasonable amount of time and it's not super inefficient compared to just asking about something, then I think you should just figure it out on your own. Anyway, tip number 4, character introductions. Who are these characters we'll be getting to know in this project? Don't just mention what players will find out about characters throughout the game itself. Go deeper into the backstory of every character. Maybe your players don't need to know about all this, but we do. In other words, everything you know about a character is something we want to know about too. Why? If we want to truly capture the essence of your characters in every language, we need to truly understand these characters and how they operate. For us, they're not just lines of code, they're real, or at least they need to be for an effective localization job. So here, I kind of agree, and it's also related to the next point, which I'm just going to read. Details about your game world. We need to become fully immersed in your world to give you a translation that accurately depicts your game. There may be some details about your game world that you know about in the back of your mind, but remember that the localization team is not around throughout the entire development process. Help us to get up to speed with all the details. Even if you feel that certain aspects of your game wouldn't be relevant to the localization process, we'd still like to know all about it. This will give us the additional context we need to take your localization from good to amazing. So, both character introductions and details about your game world are kind of like the... How would I describe this? So this is like the deeper understanding of a game, like the lore, like the world and the characters, where they come from and stuff like that. So I think, I absolutely agree with this. I'm actually wondering, and I cannot say anything about this because I don't have any experience. I don't know any translators that work on games, but I'm actually wondering, like, with all this information that should be provided by the client, whether the translators actually go through all that material to understand the game. And again, I don't know. I don't know, because like, judging from the experience that I have from like software or marketing, usually things needs to be done pretty fast. And even I'm also wondering like about compensation, because I know that sometimes the translators can actually refuse to look at this material because like they need to spend the time for that. So some of them might actually be asked for compensation. So then if you are like a client and your LSP tells you that they need like a full introduction of the characters and details about the game world, and hey, you also need to give us extra money so that all of our translators can read it. I'm not sure how that would work out. So this is about games. I'm trying to think how it would work with other types of localization. And one thing that I forgot to think about is media localization. So there were a couple of articles in earlier episodes that talk about, money heist. They talk about subtitling and stuff like that. So again, I think that is something that might be relevant to media localization and maybe even for marketing For media localization, absolutely, because like you should know the world that like the content is set in, unless it's like like right now Earth or something like that. Like for example, like if you have like a fantasy movie and you do subtitles for that. And the same goes definitely for characters. Actually, it would be nice to. Oh wait! I think there was I think like the second or the third episode was about the localization of Metal Gear Solid. And it was from the perspective of a translator that had to work on it, and he had to translate the game from Japanese into English, and he had to do all this research about like a lot of the army tech stuff that Hideo Kojima uses in his games. I think he didn't talk about characters, because again, it's one thing that you can get by playing the game, but yeah, like especially like for Hideo Kojima games, like the characters are very complex. I think like even the world has its own specifics. So this is again something that might be very useful for the translators. And when it comes to marketing, I'm trying to think about, it goes back to like what I was saying earlier when it comes to the target player, which in case of marketing would be the target audience. So maybe, I don't know, I had some, I watched some marketing educational videos where they talk about personas that you need to create. So maybe sharing these personas with the translator team would actually help them. And actually, I think even if you are a project manager, having like a good idea of who the marketing content is aimed for might actually help you decide like which translator to use. And again, I think that's not something that I have seen before, so maybe it's like the next evolution. Like okay, this is like another idea that I had, kind of like business idea. I think based on what I was saying for the first point, like really have specific and contextual messages for each small cohort so that it's more targeted. I think based on that, we might need a certain like I would call it Gary V localization. So the way Gary V targets and how many different pieces of content and ads he creates so that they are more contextual and so that they convert better, I think there's a place, maybe not, for a company which would be just focused on this. Of course, like traditional LSP could maybe, I mean, nothing is preventing them from like having 2 or 3 different translators for a certain language based on the target copy. But I think like if somebody just specializes on that, maybe all the businesses that are following Gary V could actually be attracted to this Gary V localization LSP. And if nobody does anything about it, I will do something about it. Okay. Tip number 6, and there's 3 more. Oh my god, I need to stop talking. Context hints. Speaking of context, the more we have, the better the localization. Here's a quick example of why context can make a huge difference in localizing to other languages, even though it may not play a huge part in localizing to English. In French and many other languages, nouns and adjectives are gendered, unlike English. This means knowing the gender of your characters is crucial to an accurate localization in these languages. For example, "You are an excellent driver" would be translated differently in French if the driver in question was male or female. This may seem like a very minor point, but it will sound really odd to a French player and thus reduce their enjoyment of the game. Here's how you can provide your localization team with more context information. String order and name. Make an effort to organize your strings in a logical way that provides as much context as possible. It's best if your text is sorted chronologically, but in case this is not possible, try organizing it per stage, per quest, or even per character. Just don't sort it in alphabetical order. String IDs can also contain hints to help the localization team understand when and how this string is being used. So getting just like a bunch of Excel rows that are sorted alphabetically is not probably very helpful. I'm wondering, like, in 2019, like, if there are really no better tools. And I think I had this idea before. I think I haven't shared it on the podcast yet. The idea is very simple. Like, you have like some, I don't know, string table for your game, and I have no idea how games are programmed and where the strings reside, but the idea to give the best context to the translators would be, so you're translating in some cat tool, but anytime you change the string, you could get like the game would generate the screen where that string would appear, so that you would get like a full context. So yeah, next thing, context nodes. If you're afraid of going overboard and overwhelming your localization team with comments, don't be. Too many comments on a localization file are far better than not enough. Adding images of characters and props can help with context as well. List all your tags. We need to know the meaning and function of all your tags so we can translate accordingly. For example, what string will appear instead of the tag? Can it be plural? Can it be moved in the sentence? Here I'm just wondering, like, how, if you're like a developer, especially like a small one, maybe even a bigger one, like how would you actually find the time to explain these tags? And I understand these tags kind of mean like something like variables. Yeah, I don't know, like it would be like really, really something that I haven't seen. Like, especially when I remember like how we localized Windows Vista in my early days in Moravia. Like there was like no explanation. Like just imagining like that the dev team would provide us with like the definitions of all the variables and like what are the possibilities, then I don't see that very realistic. Anyway, number 7, editable text files. So this is about never hard coding strings that need to be localized, and they're saying that the text should be kept in spreadsheets. PO files are fine too, but they're not the most practical format for us to work with. So yeah, never hard coding string, that's like the basic principle of internationalization. So I'm not going to stop there. Number 8, questions and answers. Jot down all of the foreseeable questions about your game and answer them ahead of time. For example, should the title be localized? Should character location names be transliterated? Every question and answer that you include in this file will save you precious time. Time you would otherwise be spending going back and forth to explain a concept to your translators. So this is again something that I pointed out in the beginning. Like if like a new client that just did their first or second game and they just want to test what localization can bring them. Them noting down all the foreseeable questions, it's kind of like a very naive thing, I think, because like how can the new people like foresee questions that might come from the localization team if they have no experience with localization? Wrapping it up, allocating time to maximize the efficiency of the translation. Even if you include the most thorough localization style guide that's humanly possible, we will still need to ask you questions about your game through our online QA sheet to provide you with the best translation we can. And that's a good thing. Spending time collaborating will give us an opportunity to get up close and personal with everything your game entails. To make this process as painless and efficient as possible, make sure to allocate time to work with us and answer these questions. So even if you are a support client and you did all this work and you prepared these huge documents for your new LSP, they will still ask questions. The thing that I can only comment on here before my eyes shut down and I'll just fall asleep is that they mention online QA sheet. I can just imagine some basic Google spreadsheet, which actually might work in these days, but I thought that we are far ahead from spreadsheets, even though they are online. I think a more sophisticated ticketing system for handling queries might be a better option, but of course it depends on the client and the size of the operations. So if it's a small indie game developer, then yeah, probably a shared Google spreadsheet might make more sense.